concept of consciousness, which is in the title of the symposium, The Future of Human Collective Consciousness, seems to be something that all of us immediately think we know what it is. And we at Closer to Truth have focused on consciousness for now more than 20 years in terms of our television series and global web resource. And have spoken to literally hundreds of people, and everybody seems to be very sure of what consciousness is and how it works in their own way. And yet the different ways of thinking about it, of course, are radically different. So what I'm going to do today is focus on one aspect of the noosphere, and that is the word consciousness itself. Certainly, Teilhard de Chardin was, as for everyone here, a great influence on me personally. Growing up as a teenager, made me see the world in a totally different way, and really can be said to be one of the forerunners or founders of Closer to Truth in terms of its later development from his ideas. So what we're going to do today is focus on consciousness, and what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to give you the answer, and I'm not going to give you my opinion. So those are two things I'm not going to do about consciousness. But what I will do is present what I call a landscape to give the totality of all the views about consciousness, what I call a taxonomy of explanations, and then we're going to look at some of the implications of it. So this will be a landscape. It's going to be a very broad brush. We don't have a lot of time. I'll actually be doing, you can, viewers and participants can see many videos, literally 1,500 videos on consciousness on the Closer to Truth website and YouTube channel. I'm doing a major review article on it that'll be published next year. So for this short time that we have together, I just want to give you the flavor, let it all wash over you. There'll be literally more than 100 different ideas of consciousness and interrelate in different ways. I just want you to get the feel for the totality of what we're doing. So it's a landscape of consciousness in the noosphere. We're going to try to develop a taxonomy, a structure for the explanations and theories, and see what they mean. So what I will do is I will have a group of different categories, and they'll be roughly organized from a physicalist to a non-physicalist movement. It won't be precise because there are many different overlaps and all sorts of things that I can talk about, but I want to give you this landscape so you get the whole picture on this roughly physicalist to non-physicalist flow. And there's no left to right implications, political or otherwise. It's just a taxonomy in two dimensions that we have to do. And I should mention that we will be developing a series, a mini-series in Closer to Truth based on this conference with some of the participants that we'll be developing over the next several months. And then once we have those explanations of consciousness, what I want to do quickly is to show what are the applications of that. Now, generally it's in the noosphere, but all of these categories in the four last bullets on this page are the implications of each of the kinds of natures of consciousness. What would it mean for meaning, purpose, value, if any? Or what would it mean for AI consciousness, a hot topic today, obviously? Virtual immortality and survival beyond death. So briefly, each of the categories, what would be the implication that we go? So let me give you just some background, personal background. As I said, Teilhard was one of my heroes growing up. My doctorate from UCLA Brain Research Institute is in neuroscience, cerebrocortical electrical activity. I followed philosophy my whole career, so it's really a blend of philosophy and neuroscience is my background. Closer to Truth, some of you may know, is divided into three parts. Cosmos, dealing with cosmology, physics, mathematics; consciousness, which deals with brain, mind, free will, personal identity, etc., and meaning, where we look at broader issues in philosophy of religion and different ways of structuring meaning. But we encompass it all within a critical thinking environment. Since 2000, we've been on PBS stations all around the country. We've done 323 episodes, and we have 40 in production. More importantly today is the web, of course, the Closer to Truth website, our YouTube channel with lots of subscribers. Once again, the areas of consciousness we cover are broadly free will, personal identity, is there life after death, etc. And call out credit to Peter Getzells, who's co-creator, producer, and director, and we've been partners now since 2006 in doing this. So let's go on. What we're going to talk about consciousness, it'll be phenomenal consciousness, the smell of garlic cooking in oil, the last movement, the choral movement of Mahler's Second Symphony, your sight at seeing your firstborn child just moments after birth, that phenomenal consciousness, many other kinds of definitions. Now, I'm not concerned with what's associated with it or what is needed for it or how it evolved or why it emerged, but we're going to look at just the core essence of what it is. And in doing this, sometimes we have to distinguish between epistemological and ontological. We focus on ontological. We recognize, of course, the correlation versus causation problem. I focus on the concept of identity theory because that's one of literally dozens and dozens of ideas about consciousness. But identity theory itself is maybe one of the archaic approaches to consciousness, but it has a broader understanding because whatever your theory of consciousness is, however it works, in one way or another, you have to, for sure, say what it is that is consciousness. That's what's causing it, but what it is. That's what my landscape is gonna try to do. Obviously, we do it with Dave Chalmers' hard problem. It's phenomenal consciousness, which is the fundamental question. There's a huge literature on it. Again, I'm not gonna solve the problem. I'm not gonna give you my opinion. I'm gonna give you the totality of the landscape. Many of you may have other views of consciousness, not on the landscape. I encourage you to tell me this is not exhaustive. I'm trying to make it exhaustive. That's impossible, but I look to everyone's help to do so. Okay, so here are the big categories. And then what I'm going to do is go through each of these in some depth. So the first one, the biggest one, is materialism or physicalism categories, that only the physical is real. We're going to get into that in great depth. Non-reductive physicalism, quantum theories, integrated information theory is very special. It's one theory. It has its own category, very special characteristics, very controversial today, as many of you know. It's been attacked by many neuroscientists and philosophers, but deserves a real thorough hearing. And then, of course, when we go beyond physicalism, panpsychisms, different kinds of monisms, dualisms, idealisms, and then the last two are a little bit different. I have what I call a paranormal and altered state category, because there are lots of theories that are informed or energized by paranormal ideas in ESP. Many of them are energized by near-death experiences, out-of-the-body experiences. And so because they are motivated by those kinds of events, which are controversial. Many people think that they don't exist, of course, but if they do, they lead to other things. But these theories are ones that are generated from that. So although they might fit into other categories in terms of what consciousness is, I put them separate because they have this separate motivation. And at the end, there's a number of thinkers that I respect who have different views of consciousness, basically kind of criticizing the whole picture in different ways. So let's start with materialism theories. This is the first big category. It's by far the biggest. And I subdivided into 8 different categories of materialistic thinking: philosophical, neurobiological, what's called homeostatic and affective, computational complexity, language, relational, representational, and then phylogenetic evolution. So each of those are components under material. They're all materialistic theories. They all say that only the physical is real, but have radically different concepts of what consciousness is. So we're going to go through each one of them very specifically, very quickly. Under philosophical, generally we start with eliminative materialism, that consciousness is a kind of illusion. It's not really illusion. People characterize the view of the Churchlands, Dan Dennett, Keith Francis, that's saying it doesn't exist, and how could it not exist because we're thinking about it doesn't exist, so that's self-refuting. That's an oversimplification. It's a legitimate argument, but that's not this view, and it's unfair to characterize it as such. It does have a contribution to make. Epiphenomenalism, which is that consciousness is the foam on the wave. We think it means something, but has no relationship to causation. Functionalism, that it doesn't matter what the medium is, it's just the functions involved and how that occurs. Specifically, mind-brain identity theory, and then direct perception, that we're able to see the reality, the real world is our direct perception of it. There's no intermediary thing. Kind of a strange idea, but maybe an old idea that has some merit. So neurobiological, they're all neurobiological, but these are different approaches to the neurobiology. John Searle's what he called biological naturalism. Ned Block called it biological reductionism. Christoph Koch, originally, Christoph has had very interesting development in his thinking. The neural correlates of consciousness was how he began with Francis Crick. Very important contribution. The global workplace theory of Bars and DeHaan's, multiple drafts, which is Dan Dennett's approach. Dan has a very sophisticated approach to consciousness, which we deal with quite significantly. Michael Graziano, and then there are various theories that are regarding brain circuitry, electromagnetic fields, etc. So that's in the neurobiological. Homeostatic, I start with, these are top-down predictive theories, famously the free energy of Frischin, Andy Clark, Mark Sohm. They have various approaches to this, Anil Seth on the beast machine theory, very sophisticated. Antonio Damasio regarding the importance of emotions. Again, free energy principle, which is Frischin, and others along those lines in homeostatic. Under computational theories, Stephen Grossberg's adaptive resident theory, very sophisticated, complex, but here are some various kinds of computational theories. Holographic, holomnemonic, called Privam originally. Many of these have been developed further. On language, I originally didn't put language as a primary category, but in one of the reviews of this paper I'm submitting, the reviewer suggested that language is exceedingly important, and I went back and fleshed that out. It's not it's not what consciousness is, but the relationship seems strong enough that we need to consider it. And of course, Noam Chomsky, again, John Searle has done a lot of that as well, and different people. Famously, Julian Jaynes, The Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, which some of you may remember from, 40 years ago, was a startling idea. That the language and the internal mechanisms that we thought that were talking to us, when that broke down, then we developed consciousness emerged out of that. That's one of the theories that is almost certainly wrong, but it's very instructive, which I love about studying consciousness, because even though you know something is not right, it enriches your thinking, and it gives you a greater sense of appreciation for the depth of what consciousness is. That's why I've loved exploring this landscape with, I think I counted 125 or more of these different kinds of theories. Again, a lot of overlap and a lot of difficult, of course, to cleanly do it, to do a distinction. Relational theories, that things have to have a relationship part, have had many different expressions of it. George Lakoff was one of the original ones with embodied cognition. And then in activism, mind and life, these are biological, relation to biology, extended mind, where the consciousness really, you can't just say what it's in our head, various other approaches as well. Representational, these begin to get more complex, higher order theories, mental representations. Nicholas Humphrey has some very interesting ideas. I may not agree with the conclusion, but very, very sophisticated thinking. And some of these other kinds of representational. Of course, our favorite Terry Deacon with symbolic communications is in this area as well. Under phylogenetic evolution, this is a cause, this is an emergence. I said we weren't going to do that, but there are aspects, and I think Dan Dennett does it wonderfully, where you can really appreciate the essence of consciousness by seeing it's the developmental process. So, pardon me for going so quickly, but we have a lot to cover. Non-reductive physicalism is its own category, and basically that says that the consciousness is entirely physical, solely the product of biological brains, but mental states or properties are irreducibly distinct from physical properties, and so they cannot be explained by physical law, brains or elsewhere. I've always had a trouble with that, one way or the other. And then if it's physical, why, how do you get the separate state? This also involves property dualism. There's a lot of similarities between property dualism and non-reductive physicalism. I list these here as something that is important just to see the categories of what they are, different people expressing it in different ways. George Ellis, the cosmologist, mathematical physicist, and a wonderful creative thinker, has been a proponent of strong emergence and top-down causation in non-reductive physicalism. I should say that this has been a favorite of a minority, but a growing minority, and a smart minority of the Christian philosophers who very much believe in the Christian theology, but also have a physicalist approach. And Peter Van Inwagen, Nancy Murphy are maybe two of the primary people in this area, others too. But Peter Van Inwagen has a wonderful paper on showing how if there's a God and if there's a resurrection, how that would work in a non-reductive physicalism manner. I recommend that paper as you may not agree with any of the premises, but it's very well thought out, as of course only Peter can do. Quantum theories, there's a huge number, and I've listed some that I'm somewhat aware of, and they're all fascinating and very different. When you say a quantum theory, what does that mean? Is it just the breakdown of the collapsing of the wave function? That's the way we normally think consciousness is involved, but many different. In fact, I have 3 different kinds of things, that there are quantum processes in the brain that work, and of course Penrose Hameroff has that approach. There's a quantum explanation that have nothing to do with brain activity, or that matter and consciousness are dual aspects of one reality, which are kind of monisms, but with a quantum base. So each one of the theories I've listed here are really fascinating to explore. Again, you may not want to believe any of these in specific, but they are all really important to if you're interested in consciousness, each one of these has its own characteristic. I don't want to single any more out because they're all really good. And in virtually all of the things I'm saying, we have videos on Closer to Truth on these subjects. Integrated information theory, many of you already know that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is a unique idea created by Giulio Tononi and supported by Christoph Koch. We have many videos on that on Closer to Truth. And where I would point out is they have a very specific axioms and postulates and ways of measuring consciousness with phi. But at the core of my question, not how you measure consciousness or is a person in a coma conscious, which are important, critical, clinical questions, but not an ontological question. They have what is I would call qualia space, qualia meaning the experience of a phenomenal consciousness, and that space is some sort of a Hilbert space that is used in physics, but not Hilbert, but a different kind of space that is inhabited by qualia. Literally, an infinite number of qualia would have this different structure. As many of you know, this has been challenged by 124 scientists, neuroscientists, and philosophers, calling it pseudoscience. That may be an unfair word. I think there are arguments on both sides beyond the scope of this talk, but integrated information theory is definitely an important category. Panpsychism is that there is something in the fundamental aspect of reality that has a phenomenal or proto-phenomenal property that's fundamental, non-reducible, whether it is some kind of an ultimate actual consciousness or needs to have to be combined in some way to even get a micro conscious experience. These are all different aspects, and I list some of the different categories here. The two primary ones are a micropsychism, which is the general one, that consciousness is part of everything, that every particle, every wave that exists, and then they have to combine together. And the combination problem, how you do that is hard. And then the opposite in panpsychism is cosmopsychism, which is that the whole entity is conscious, and that individual consciousnesses then are somehow subsets of that in some way. Again, lots to explore there. Monisms, basically, that says that everything is product of one thing and it's just expressed in different ways. There's one concrete thing or object. Everything is part of that. It either is derived from it or literally part of it, that there really is only one thing and we're just a subset, or we're derived from it. Subtle difference. Many very sophisticated ideas. Of course, it started with Bertrand Russell and Russellian monism. Other people have developed it. One of my favorite is Galen Strawson, because he says that his panpsychic world is the real materialism, and people who are materialists are just using the term wrong. So Galen is not a spiritualist. He's not. He doesn't believe in anything beyond materialism. But his materialism is very much has very much consciousness in it. But he takes issue with anybody who uses the word materialism without having consciousness as a fundamental part of it. But there are many different kinds of monisms that are, just absolutely fascinating to read. I mean, everything on this page is worth a detailed study in terms of how they think and why they think that it's derived from it. Dualisms, many of you are familiar with, and they are in a philosophical way and then developed from a religious point of view and various religions. I single out property dualism because that's like non-physical reductionism, and by not being substance dualism, it could be its own category because it doesn't say there are two different kinds of substances. Richard Swinburne, Christian philosopher, of course, has had probably the most articulate modern defense of substance dualism in the classic sense. And emergent dualism, the last on this list, is particularly interesting because that says that you don't need a God to create this dualistic non-physical substance, that there could be some meta psychophysical law in reality that says once you get a certain physical things together, there's a natural product that comes out that's non-physical. So that to me is an interesting thought. Again, I'm sure that every interesting thought is almost certainly wrong, but they enlarge your thinking. And then the second category is some of the traditional approaches to the nature of the soul in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament and Islam, and in Indian religions, which is also fascinating. Indigenous religions has the soul. These are things that many would say are pre-scientific and not relevant today. I would say they're still relevant in terms of our understanding, either historically or in reality, what is the common belief of humanity. That's a data point that I would not dismiss. Idealisms, this says consciousness is the only, not only is ultimate reality, but it's the only thing, and everything else, the physical world, is a derivative or part of it, and it's expressed in many different kinds of ways. Certainly, the traditional Indian religions, Hinduism, Advaita Vedanta primarily, Buddhism's empty, illusory, Bernard Kastrup's analytical idealism, many of these other categories that that we're familiar with. And we at Closer to Truth get literally dozens each year of interesting people giving us new ideas about consciousness. And I'd say a third of them, maybe half, have idealism as their core, expressed in different ways. I mentioned this before in paranormal and altered state theories. That just says that if you believe in a reality of psi phenomena, ESP, near-death experiences, out-of-the-body experiences, if any of these things have any degree of truth, even if you dismiss 99.9% as illusion, delusion, or fraud, if anything is true, it could reorient our nature. So there's a bunch of theories about the nature of consciousness that are grounded in the belief in these ideas. And so I put them in a separate category. It's not a separate kind of consciousness. They would each be a dualism or an idealism or something like, or a monism, but they're by being derived from this belief in these non-traditional scientific areas. I put them in their own category. What I call challenge theories, these are ideas by very sophisticated people who have different approaches to it. Tom Nagel's Mind and Cosmos was highly criticized by many, obviously one of the leading philosophers of mind, and he certainly not a theist. Famously said, it's not that he doesn't think God, it's not that he thinks God doesn't exist, it's that he hopes God doesn't exist, but yet he has some teleology built into the nature of the cosmos. Colin McGinn, we say Mysterianism means we can't know what it is. That's not his term. That was sort of a semi-pejorative term that others had used, like Big Bang for cosmology. That wasn't the Big Bang theorist. That was an opponent, Fred Hoyle, who made a funny name. So Mysterianism is the same, but it's a theory that either our brains are not, we haven't evolved to be able to understand it, or it's just beyond comprehension. Similarly, others, Ray Tallis, UK polymath, one of our key contributors to Closer to Truth, is also a very strong atheist, but is very much against a materialistic approach to consciousness. I would also single out Paul Davies at the end, that Paul's approach to the universe is that the universe is about something. Again, not a theist, but there's something about the universe, and he considers consciousness a critical data point, not an accident. So now I want to take just a very few more minutes the application of these to these four categories. And what we can do is to take, I'm going to just go to AI consciousness and just say for each of these, for each of these theories of consciousness, what would be the implication? So if materialism theories are right, yes, there's no doubt that AI consciousness is sure. I don't think it would be soon. I think the techno-optimists are wildly understating the nature of the problem. But if we say 100 years, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, in principle, it's absolutely sure, because there's nothing special about consciousness. Same with non-reductive physicalism, except that non-reductive physicalism adds the importance of strong emergence, which I'm not sure exactly how that would work. For quantum theories, this would seem to be the lead category for AI consciousness. It would seem to be very easily to be able to be done. With integrated information theory, I need to think more about it. I'm uncertain about what that says. I think Tononi says that, he does not believe in AI consciousness as a result of IIT, but I think that's in process. Panpsychism, it would seem that you would be able to get AI consciousness because the proto-consciousness is built into anything anyway, but you have to be able to manipulate this proto-consciousness. Same with monisms. With dualism, it's unlikely that you'd have AI consciousness unless you have this emergent dualism that I referred to earlier, because dualism says there has to be some non-physical component that you don't know, that is not part of the physical world. So that would obviate and make AI consciousness, in principle, impossible, with that one exception of emergent dualism. Idealism, if all is consciousness, it seems to be a head start to AI consciousness, but again, not sure. Virtual immortality, I can go through the same thing, but I won't do it. But all I'll say is that virtual immortality, which people put into the same breath, is a huge next step after AI consciousness. AI consciousness is a necessary but not sufficient for virtual immortality. If there's no possibility for AI consciousness, then there's absolutely no possibility for virtual immortality. If there is AI consciousness, still you have much more work to do with virtual immortality to be able to get there. Survival beyond death is a similar kind of approach. I left the last page blank in terms of reflections because the reflections I look for everyone to do themselves. I look forward to questions that will come in that will be sent, and I will try to send the video later. Once again, we at Close to the Truth very much appreciate working with Human Energy and the Noosphere, and we look forward to our producing this joint mini-series together that will be coming in the future. Thank you very much. Great opportunity to participate.